What was your finest moment of revenge? I ground up laxatives and tainted all my kitchen fridge food with it to figure out which of my 7 roommates was eating all my food, while I survived off a secret stash in my mini fridge. I found out who did it very quickly. This may seem small, but it was the most satisfying thing I have ever done. When I was in the 7th grade, I sat behind a jerk who hated me and enjoyed being annoying. Every single goddamn day he would lean back in his chair and hit the front of my desk, over and ever again. If I was trying to write something, he would do it even harder. So one day I decided enough was enough, and in the middle of a lesson he started again. So I waited, and right as he was leaning his chair back fast, trying to knock my desk hard, I pulled it back. Without my desk behind him, his chair tipped right over and he hit the ground hard. I can still clearly remember him whispering "You be" beneath the laughter of the whole class and the teacher yelling at him to get up. The look on his face was a mixture of shock, embarrassment and pure rage as he looked up at me from the floor. Bastard never fricked with me again. A crappy repair shop in Moab, UT messed up our car, which left us stranded in a nearby national park. We called and demanded they tow the vehicle in, and while they said they'd come get us, they never did. When we talked with park rangers, they were quite familiar with the shop, the biggest in town, and with a terrible reputation. We were on our honeymoon, and had more time on our hands than I imagine most travelers do. We went to the shop, demanded a full refund, and when they refused, we sat out front on the curb in our camp chairs for 2 days with homemade protest signs. I was overwhelmed with the support we got from locals, who honked and waved, stopped and chatted with us and shared their own stories of horror. The owner called the cops on us, but the joke was on him. We'd already notified the police we'd be protesting, and were well within our rights in doing so. In the end, the shop owner refunded all our money, and left visibly distressed when we told him that even with the refund, we weren't sure we were ready to leave town. Eventually we did, but not before filing complaints with the Better Business Bureau and every review site we could find. They'd already been booted from the Chamber of Commerce. We ended up becoming friends with an awesome local mechanic, and having a great story to tell. Justice was served, and without a tinge of guilt. Long story short, and kid I was friends with hit me in the balls 3 times in one night. He then called me a wee baby and got in my face. He tried to make me flinch by half swinging at me. I didn't flinch, but instead headbutted him with everything I had. Crushed his nose, blood pouring out of his face. I had a tiny cut in the center of my forehead, with 1 line of blood running down my face. I looked freaking psychotic, but badass. Also, frick you for that, David. This has to have been in Scotland. When I was 12 years old, a kid beat me up at a birthday party for reasons unknown. 4 years later, the kid is a pitcher, and a very good one at that, for his school in the playoffs. I was playing for the other team. After going 0-3 to start the game, I hit a walk-off home run off of him to advance to the next round. Kid actually started crying on the mound. I don't think I've ever had a bigger smile than I did in that moment. Still have the ball in my apartment at college. Being better than him at something he loves. Best form of revenge right there. During our 100 multiple choice law exam, I wrote all my answers on the original exam page and colored in wrong answers on the Scantron sheet. The girl who copied me since day one thought she was going to pass this exam worth 30% of our final mark. She looked over and copied almost each of my Scantron answer, then guessed a few, handed it in, and left for the winter break. I erased all my old answers, put the correct answers in, handed it in, and left. I got 71/100 and barely managed to pass that class. I'll find out what she got on Tuesday when I maybe see her with a gun at my locker. When I was 11 years old, I was bullied by a 12-year-old boy. He would steal things from my lunch every day. I got sick of it and decided to do something about it. One day, I brought a super hot pepper in my lunch and pretended to be really excited about it. Sure enough, the boy comes over, snatches it from my hand and pops it in his mouth. He practically exploded in pain, writhing around the floor, unable to handle the heat. I calmly looked at him and told him that drinking a nice glass of cold water would help immensely. He did so. This promptly magnified the pain 100x. He never stole food from me again. I regret nothing. Revenge is best served hot. beating the crap out of the man who abused and beat my mother for 6 years. 7 years later and she still has no idea. So my grandfather was driving and an obviously drunk man threw a rock and shattered his windshield. My grandfather talked to him and told him, if you give me your real number, I'll only have you pay for half of the windshield or we can figure something out. The guy turned out to give him a fake number. A year later, my grandfather picks up a guy from Park and Ride. Carpooling. He happens to be the man that shattered his windshield. They're driving on the freeway and the guy doesn't recognize him. He's being rude and talking on his phone. My grandpa asks to see his phone and throws it out the window. The guy freaks out and my grandpa goes, "Remember me." He then made him get out of the car. When I was a kid, probably 4 or 5 years old, I was watching Dumbo with my neighbor. The elephants on parade part was scary as all heck to me back then, and I peed my pants. My neighbor told everyone in my pre-K class and would not stop calling me the pants peer for weeks. Finally, one day I slept over at her house and took a pair of her pants out her closet, put them on, and peed in them. I woke her up to show her, and that's the story of how I became the 2-time pants peer. Kid logic. There was a guy in high school who was a complete butt to me. For a couple years, I decided to exact revenge via magazine. I went to the school library and pulled subscription cards out of every female magazine I could get my hands on, and a few strange ones like Psychology Today and Architectural Digest, and filled out cards in his name, with his address, and checked bill me later. I overheard him complaining a few months later how he kept getting all these magazines he never ordered and it was getting irritating. Score. I was living in a Middle Eastern country a few years back. Nice place, but because 50% of the population in the region is under the age of 20, the roads are simply overrun by teenage and early 20s douchebags. The culture's fatalism makes young guys even more reckless and irresponsible than they are already programmed to be by their hormones. So, after a rare rain shower, the highway is flooded up ahead, 18 inches deep. Traffic is backed up for at least a mile, and it takes us 15 minutes to get to the flooded patch. Everyone is peed. Then I see 2 cars full of teenage douchebags passing people on the shoulder on the right from way behind me. Mother sucker, there's just no excuse for that horse scrap. Eventually they get to where I am, and they pass me just as we're reaching the 50-yard stretch where the flooding is crossing the road. And wouldn't you know it, one of them crosses into the far left lane, and one stays in the right lane to avoid the deep water in the middle lane. And wouldn't you know it, their windows are all down. I'm in a Toyota Land Cruiser, nice big 4WD, so while they're crawling through a foot of water in their little action boy Hondas, I decide frick it and gun IT between them through the deep stuff in the middle lane. The wave from my front wheels was about 6 feet high, and it had to have put 20 gallons of water through the windows of both cars, completely fricking drenched, all of them, with nasty urban stormwater runoff. Of course they chased up after me once they cleared the water, screaming and cursing, but I just pretended to be on my phone and ignored them. Eventually they gave up and, I hope, figured I had just been as impatient and selfish as them and had hosed them by accident. The most satisfying revenge of my life. Driving to drop someone off, my radar detector went off. Saw a cop sitting in a parking lot. Dropped off my friend and headed back. The whole way some butt is tailgating me. Speed limit's 40. I'm doing 45 and he's so close I can't see his headlights. We come up to a traffic circle and he tries to pass me on the right. I sped up and he kept trying. We hit about 80-90 with him on the shoulder. Come up to the crest of a hill and I know the cop is right on the other side. I hit the brakes and he flew up over the hill. Had to be doing 90 in a 40. I even stopped to let the cop out of the parking lot. Most satisfying thing ever. Signed out of all devices on Netflix. That'll show her. Animal. Years ago, living in an apartment in Johannesburg, the block consisted mostly of elderly folk and a few young working couples like me and my wife, who generally hit the sack early. The place was like a morgue after 10 PM, until a couple of guys move into the place below us. Party types, who would whoop it up till dawn. If anyone complained, they'd quickly get threatening. The owner of the apartment was one of the guys' dad, so they had no fear of being kicked out. One evening, around midnight, they hooked up with some mates and girls to go clubbing. They were outside on the road, talking, yelling, girls screeching, bedlam. Eventually they depart. I was furious, but being an original 90-pound wimp, felt helpless. Then I remembered the tube of superglue in my desk drawer. I went to their flat, which had a serious security gate protecting the front door. I put the glue nozzle into the gate lock, a heavy-duty bolt lock, and squeezed the sucker dry. Couple of hours later, lying in bed, I hear the party hardies arrive back. Same deal as when they left, making a heck of a commotion as they spill out their cars and head for the apartment. Then silence. Later I heard they ended up breaking a toilet window and getting in that way. The girlfriends of course were having none of it, so they buggered off, as did the mates. The next day they had to get in locksmith, who used a blowtorch to cut the lock out of its steel casing. This damaged the door behind, so both gate and door had to be replaced, along with the bathroom window. Because these boneheads did not have the money for all this, the dad who owned the apartment had to cough. He was so peed off that he kicked out the roommate. From then on, it was the quietest flat in the building. When I was in 4th grade, I was pushed around a lot by a kid who thought he was hot crap. I told my parents. I told my teacher. They told the teacher and the principal. No avail. So, one day on the stairs he kicks the back of my shoe, making it pop off and fall. I turn and punch him in the stomach. He keeled over and fell down about 5-6 stairs to the next landing. I didn't even get in trouble, and even though he is still in butthole, he never dared to touch me again. Someone at my apartment complex kept stealing our newspaper. One Sunday I got up very early, brought in the Sunday paper, took it out of its colored bag, took the Saturday paper that I had filled full of baby powder, put it in the Sunday paper bag and put it back outside the door. No one ever stole my paper again. This isn't that great, but I worked as a contractor helping IT set up hardware for a branch of hospitals. Almost everyone was easy to get along with, but one of the contractors treated me like I was an idiot because I was the only one there without any formal IT training. It was a daily explanation of something very simple that I already understood. Okay, C-dubs too. You know how to put a USB in, right? Laughs, right? Well, okay, but just in case you forgot, let me show you. Dude, we did not have time for this ego trip bulls. I just kept my mouth shut and worked my butt off for the length of the contract. A few months later, I was rehired by the same IT team. They wanted me to go through the previous contractors we had that summer and pick out which ones to help out with our project. Guess who didn't get hired? When I used to be a cheerleader, we were organizing a trip to Florida from the UK to do some training and to have an awesome holiday. I took charge of organizing the flights and asked everyone if they were okay paying me back if I bought all the flights together. Yeah, I know, bad idea. Anyway, needless to say, one girl changed her mind about going because she was starting a new job, and just before we were due to go I got a handwritten note in the post from her mother. We were in our 20s, saying that she never agreed to me booking a flight on her behalf and that she wasn't liable to pay me because she had decided not to go. I was in a bit of a panic because I didn't have her home address, and she just ignored all my calls and emails. I wanted to take her to court, but to do that you have to have their address in order to serve the papers. After spending ages trying to ask around if people knew her address, and even trying to get her friends to give it to me without success, I stayed up all night figuring out a way to figure out where she lived. It literally took me all night, but I managed to hack into her Hotmail account and then her PayPal account, which led me to her home address. I could have just taken the money from her account, but I did want to do this as by the book as possible. She turned up in court accompanied by her mother, and they tried to use Facebook photos to prove that I had used her ticket to take someone else in her place. I came armed with a printout of the airline terms which clearly stated that the tickets were non-transferable. Judgment was swift. Victory was mine. This one comes to mind because I thoroughly enjoyed it. I was out snowblowing the driveway one day. Some dude who is a friend of my sister's walks up to me and throws a snowball at me. He then gave that look like, "What are you gonna do about it, man?" and laughed, putting his hands up as if to go on. Dude, do you not see this large snow moving device I am pushing around? Only took several seconds to completely coat him in snow, and the look of defeat on his face was glorious. There was the kid in junior high that was always in my crap. Not a bully, but just 2 parts donghead and 1 part B. Constantly trolling me, following me around talking crap. I tried turning the other cheek, being nice and crap like that, but it just was not working. Fast forward to high school, we are both on the wrestling team. I'm like one weight class above him, so we have lots and lots of close contact and he was still being a dong. Double leg takedown, scooped that crap head up in the air and dented the mat with him. Coach got peed and made me do extra cardio after practice. Felt really freaking good. I'm a professor. Many years ago, I had a small cluster of students in one course that I strongly suspected were cheating. Scattered evidence suggested that they had knowledge of my test content ahead of time. I don't let my students keep their test copies, and I rewrite my tests every semester, so this was puzzling. I determined that the most likely way they were cheating was during the photocopying process, so I set out to test that possibility first. When the next test in the course was getting close, I left the previous semester's version of the test in the photocopy room as bait. I then rewrote the new version of the test, keeping page 1 the same to avoid raising suspicions on test day but otherwise completely revising the questions. I made the new copies on another department's copier the morning of the test. Sure enough, when I graded the test I found that my cheaters all had perfect scores on the page 1 questions, but then bombed all subsequent questions to varying degrees. They all went from AS on the first 2 tests to DS and FS on the test in question. Those patterns alone probably wouldn't be enough evidence for an airtight academic integrity charge, but one of them gave up the whole group and the plan when I called her in to confront her with the test copies. Turns out they had access to my department's copy room from a former student worker and would routinely pop in and steal exams in the to be copied pile after hours. In the end, it caused a big disciplinary fuss in the administration with F grades, multiple suspensions, and 1 expulsion, which is a true rarity given how gun-shy universities are about kicking out students. The cheaters were hoisted by their own petard and I got what passes for professorly street cred among my peers for catching a well-organized group that many others had missed. My first real boyfriend, we kissed instead of just holding hands, kissed another girl and dumped me for her when I was a freshman in high school. She had actively pursued him although she knew he had a girlfriend, so I blamed her rather than him. I know. Fast forward 4 years, I was a volleyball player throughout college. In the off season I played in a city women's league and a co-ed league as an outside hitter. My team played a new team with a familiar face. She didn't recognize me different high schools, but I immediately recognized her. My team setter kept giving me amazing sets and I kept slamming the ball over the net, just waiting for my shot. Finally, she was in the back row and my setter set me up. I hit the ball and the boyfriend stealer stepped into the hit. It bounced off her foot and went straight up into her face and broke her nose. That's talent right there. Telling a group of baseball bullies that were picking on my younger brother that Snape kills Dumbledore in Half-Blood Prince after realizing they had all just started it. Monster. You have been visited by Moneybird. Upvote in 5,861 seconds and you will get rich. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video, or don't. Either way, have a great day you magnificent people.